Well, I'm going to spend a few minutes just thinking about the message of Christmas, and I'm going to do it from the readings that we had from Zach and from Abby. Move this forward a little bit here. But I want to start with a question for the children. Children, are you listening? It's a very important question. What are you excited about for Christmas? What about Christmas excites you? What do you like about Christmas? Raya. Mince pies. I am with you, Raya. Have you got a secret stash somewhere? Okay. Back in the day, I was known in our family as the mince pie thief. Mom would make them for like weeks and weeks beforehand and stash them away, but I knew where they were. What else are we excited for Christmas, children? Gabby? The family is such a right answer. Because you know, if you say family, then you get all the other stuff that you're excited about, yeah? Okay. Noxie? That Jesus was born. So spiritual, that family. Abby? The real answer. Thank you for just being straight up about all of that. Okay, with the right answer is Jesus, and the real answer is presents. Okay, right. Okay, well, there's still room for some work in the Berry family. That's good. Microphone. What? Presents. And Christmas trees. Who likes Christmas trees? Has anybody not got their Christmas tree up yet? And they're still planning to. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're very excited about. Can I ask the parents what they're excited about? Can I ask the grown-ups, what are you excited about, grown-ups, for Christmas? Don't be cynical now and tired. Ham. Ham. Okay, everybody's family recipe for the ham is being trotted out, okay? Food. Eggnog. No, wrong continent, wrong continent. What's up with that? Matt, what are you excited about for Christmas? Sleep, okay. And he's the boss. You want to speak to his employees about how excited they are about sleep. Anyway, lots of exciting things about Christmas, but I want to tell you the thing that I'm most excited about and that the Bible is most excited about, which is that we're remembering that Jesus was born to chase away darkness. Jesus was born to chase away darkness. Now, when we talk about darkness, I guess there's a couple of reasons why people don't like darkness. The first is it's kind of hard to see stuff when it's dark, when there's no light. You can't see stuff. Whatever it is, you might trip over it. It might be dangerous for you. You can't see stuff, and darkness is also therefore a little bit scary. Now, I don't know if you remember, there was a story from 2018. It's actually being turned into a National Geographic, I think kind of a film, documentary film, which has just come out a couple of weeks ago. The film is called The Rescue, and there's a movie that is being made. It's going to be released around Easter time next year, which is called 13 Lives. And it's the story of the Wild Boars football team. There were 12 boys and their coach, and they had a practice. And after the practice, they decided to go exploring in a cave in the region of Thailand that they are from, in the Tam Luang caves. And these were really deep caves. You could walk like 4 kilometers down into the earth in these caves. But the problem for these boys was that just as they went in, the monsoon rains hit, and water started flooding in the mouth of the cave and filled up the cave that they were in. And so they were trapped. It was very scary. It was all over the news for about 18 days. There was a worldwide effort. People flew in from all different countries, lots of kind of very skilled military people, the Navy SEALs from various countries. The problem was that there are people who know how to do cave rescues, And there are people who know how to do diving rescues, but there weren't very many people at all. None of these elite Navy SEAL people knew how to do a cave diving rescue. And in fact, there's only like a handful of people in the whole world, and they found a couple of them in Britain, and they aren't even like professional divers or military people. They just go and explore underwater caves for fun on the weekends, but they flew them over to Thailand because they realized these guys were the only chance. And so they went down into this cave, and after 3 hours of swimming through all of the twisty-turny tunnels, they came to a small ledge. And you know how scary the whole thing was? The problem with swimming underwater in the caves is that the water is zero visibility. You can't see your hand if it's here. There's strong currents, but they made it to an opening. There was an air pocket after 3 hours. And as they came up out of the water and they turned their lights on the ledge, they saw the 12 boys and their coach. And they were all there, and they were all still alive, but huddled up in the dark. So dark they couldn't see their hands in front of their faces either. That's one problem with darkness, isn't it? You cannot see what is going on. And the other problem with darkness is, and you can imagine, that it is really, really scary. They were trapped there for 10 days. Imagine that. That was until they were found. And there was a whole bunch of days until they were able to be rescued. And they were there wondering, are the water levels going to carry on rising? Is our oxygen going to run out? We don't have any food. They were just surviving all of that time off water dripping off of the rocks. So you see, darkness is a problem because you can't see stuff, and it makes it scary. The people Isaiah was writing to, that Zach gave us a reading for, they were stuck in darkness, in really, really deep darkness. Unati was talking about it earlier, about the fact that God, at the beginning of creation, when everything was dark, spoke light into being. These were the words that Unati shared with us. A world that was blacker than 100 midnights with no hope. From the beginning of time, God broke language into light. He moved his tongue and said, "Let there be light." And light became, illuminating the dark. That was at the beginning of creation, where God dispelled the darkness with light, but sin meant that darkness had entered into the world again, and the world was living in darkness. And the thing that people couldn't see as a result was God. And so Isaiah is speaking to Israel, God's people, and the surprising thing is they were so trapped in sin that they couldn't see God. They'd ignored him. They decided they were the boss of their lives. They decided to consult the fortune tellers and the spirits, and their lives were full of injustice. They were nasty to the poor people who lived amongst them. They were blind. They were ignorant of God. And the other problem is that they were also scared because they turned their backs on God, the God who had created them. Well, God was going to send a nasty bunch of people called the Assyrians to attack them, to teach them that they were not safe living without God. Without God on their side, Israel were not going to be any match for those Assyrians. And so for them, they felt like they were living in the shadow of death. That was their deep darkness. They couldn't see God. They were ignorant of God. And as a result, they were staring death in the face. And by rights, God should have left them there. He said, "I've loved you. I've given you everything, but you've turned your back on me. You've chosen to go on your own." He could have left them to themselves. But here is the good news, is that God was determined not to leave them in the darkness, because God always loves us far more than we can possibly love him. I hope you remember that. It's been a tough year, hasn't it? But God always loves us far more than we can possibly love him. And so darkness is not the end of the story, which is why we read the words that we did from Isaiah chapter 9. Let me read them again, some of them. "Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." The light has come, and the light is coming. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But first, children, I need your help again. I've got some things in this box over here. 3 things. And I'm going to show them to you one by one. And I need you, after I've shown all of them to you, to answer the question, which of these three things is most useful for chasing away darkness? You got the question? Which of these three things is most useful for chasing away darkness? So, piece of equipment number one. Okay, this is a megaphone, and with a loud voice, if I shouted into this now, say, darkness, get away, be gone. Okay, that's item number one. Second item, tennis racket. Okay, we could have a baseball bat, could have anything. And I mean, maybe I'm still working on my forehand, but if you go like that, get away, darkness. Second item. And this one is a bit tiny, a bit mingy. What is this? This one. Okay, what is this? Okay, it's one of these magneto things that we all, essential equipment these days, right? Okay, three items. Children, what do you think is going to be best? Jojo. The magneto, but it's really small. It's not very powerful. Hey, that megaphone is going to be way louder. I think you're right. And I think the light was God's choice too, to drive away the darkness of ignorance about him and the shadow of death. God sent a light, but it was no ordinary light. This light was a baby. We know that from verse 6. Verse 2 says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned. For, verse 6, to us a child is born, to us a son is given. The baby was the light. But again, this is no ordinary baby that we're talking about. This was a baby who would grow up to be a king. Where Isaiah says the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Those are pretty big names to give a little bitty baby born into the world. They added up mean basically he is the boss and the king of everything. This little baby. Some of you may have noticed through your exceptional powers of observation, children, that Pete and Fliss are expecting a baby quite soon, actually. And I know that they've been discussing names, and I don't want to bring up an issue which may cause marital discord, but I hear that there may be a little bit of kind of back and forth on the whole thing. Somebody's plumping for more of a traditional name. Somebody's plumping for more of maybe a more modern, unusual name. I'm not going to say which is which, so that when you eventually choose, we're not going to say who won the arm wrestle over that one. Do any of you children want to donate your name? Maybe lend your name to the baby, okay? Okay, the boys, we might have to put a twist on it because I think the word is that it might be a baby girl, so okay. All right, so you've got a bunch of names there that you can just upcycle, recycle, however you want to do it. And so we look forward with anticipation to finding out the name of the child and to meeting the little one. But I guess I can promise you now that they are not going to be calling this child the boss and the king of everything. That would be called making a rod for your own back as a parent, right? But that is what Isaiah said this darkness chasing baby would be called. The boss and the king of everything. And God's people had to wait for 700 years. They were waiting and waiting and waiting, but eventually the promise was fulfilled. The light arrived in the form of the baby who would become a king. And they gave him all of those titles, and the name of the baby was Jesus. And because Jesus was the king of everything, he could be the darkness chaser for once and for all. And that's why we just sang, didn't we? In Hark the Herald Angels Sing, glory to the newborn, the baby king. And so it's not surprising that when Jesus grew up and he started to teach people about who he was, he said to them, as Abby read for us earlier, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And so he introduces himself. I'm the light of the world. I've come to chase away darkness. I've come to chase away the fear. I've come to chase away the ignorance. And then he offers an invitation to everybody. He says, I can chase away the darkness for you as well. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. You know, when you go on a hike and it's a night hike, the person that you want to follow is the person who's carrying one of these things. And Jesus says that if you follow me, you will never walk in darkness, but you will have the light of life. Jesus is saying there's a Christmas present under everybody's tree, all wrapped up. It's free. Nobody had to buy it. You couldn't pay for it. And that present is himself. And he calls us to just believe. It's a great present to be offered. It's a great present to be offered because what light represents in the midst of darkness is hope. Do you know what those the boys said when those divers came up through the water and they shone their torch onto them and they saw that they were all there, they were all still alive? Do you know what the first thing that the boys said was? Thank you. Thank you for coming. Because they knew at that moment there was hope. They'd been fearing that they might die right there and nobody would have known. But now they had hope because there was light. And we all want hope. We hope for lots of things, don't we? We hope that our team is going to win their sports game. And if that's Man U, then I'm very sorry. But we hope that the pandemic will subside and that things are going to return to normal. We hope that Father Christmas brings us what we want for Christmas. But those aren't sure hopes. They might be disappointed, even if they don't disappoint you. Well, then they won't last. We want genuine hope in the face of life stresses and especially in the face of death. And it has been a tough year for some. Some of you have lost people who are close to you. Some of you know people who are seriously ill right now. Well, the promise of Christmas is light has overcome the darkness. It has overcome the shadow. There is real hope. And so the way to go, that's the question. How do you go from lost, like those boys, from lost to found to safely rescued? Well, it is by putting all of your trust in the boss and the king of everything, the baby who came. I don't know if you remember the story of the boys and how the story ended. The rescuers say that finding the boys was actually the easy part. It took them 9 days to find them, but it was going to take them another 9 days to get them out, because a rescue like that had never ever been done before. 2.5 hours swimming with no visibility, strong currents. The boys were weak. They hadn't been eating. They were scared. Most of them couldn't swim. None of them had ever scuba dived. And you know what the men said as they came up out of the water, and then they had to say to the boys, we see you, we know we're here, but we actually can't rescue you now. We have to leave to go and prepare a rescue for you. The words that they left them with were, believe. Believe that we will come back for you and rescue you. Even though they may have not felt certain because it had never been done before, but they said, we want you to believe. And that is the call of the Christian faith. It is to believe. You know how they rescued those boys in the end? They put each of them in a wetsuit. They put a scuba mask on their faces. And then they did something that had never been done before. They sedated them with a mixture of drugs that sedated them. You know, like if you have an operation in a hospital where you kind of go to sleep, but you're still breathing. And they tied their arms behind their back. They tied their legs together because they didn't want the boys to panic. They didn't want the boys to hurt themselves, but they were utterly helpless. They were sedated. They were tied up. There is nothing that they could do to get themselves out of that cave. And each one of them had one diver, and that diver swam the 2.5 hours to get each one of them out. Very sadly, during the whole rescue, one of the divers lost consciousness. This was in the preparation, not as they were rescuing the boys. He lost consciousness, and very sadly, he died. But every one of the boys and their coach, well, by a miracle, they all made it out. And I wonder if you understand what it took for Jesus to bring you out of darkness and into the light. For Jesus to fetch you out of darkness cost him his life. And not in an accident like that diver. That diver went in knowing that it was dangerous, knowing that there were risks. Jesus came to earth knowing for sure, not that he was placing himself in harm's way, knowing for sure that he was going to die. And so why did Jesus come that first Christmas? So that we who were lost in sin could be found. Why did he die at that first Easter? So that those who he had found, he could safely rescue. But you have to actively say yes. You have to say, I want that rescue. God gives us that dignity of choosing for ourselves. He doesn't force it on us. He gives you an invitation. And so as I finish, I want you to imagine that you were the last person left in that cave. You'd seen everybody else one by one in their wetsuits and the masks. It sedated them, tied them up. They'd taken them out, and they'd come back and said, yes, they've all been rescued safely. And then the diver comes out of the water, and he sees you there, and he says, now it's your turn. Why don't you come to me? And imagine you said to him at that point, you know what, I think I'll try to swim out myself. I kind of vaguely remember the way in when we were coming in, and I'm going to give it I'm one of the people who can swim a little bit, so I'm going to give it a shot myself. I think I'll be fine. It's not really that dark out there. You would never do that in a million years, would you? It would make absolutely no sense, because genuine help, genuine hope had arrived, and you just had to recognize it. And so my question to you is, will you turn your face towards Jesus this Christmas? And if you have done that already, if you would say you were a follower of Jesus and you're walking in the light, maybe you would say to yourself, you know what, at this time of the year, after the year that it's been, maybe the light is turned down, maybe it's a little bit more dim than what it was. But Jesus says, those who follow me will walk in darkness, and you will have the light of life in you. And so know that that light is there, and the brightness of the light does not depend on the quality of your faith. The light is in Jesus. If your faith is in him, that light is in you. And so why don't you pray and look forward to walking in the light through the rest of this holidays, through into next year, hand in hand with him? Because he said, I am the light of the world. Keep following the one who is the light. Do not walk back into the darkness. That would be like walking back into the cave with the monsoon still raging. I asked you why you were excited about Christmas. I love the presents and the food and the being together, and we hope all of that happens. We're used to getting disappointed, right? But the message of Christmas will not disappoint us, and that is why I'm most excited about the fact that Jesus was born to chase away the darkness and to put real hope in its place. And if you believe, then your story will be lost to found to safely rescued. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to finish off with our last carol. Heavenly Father, we thank you that Jesus came as the light of the world, that in him there was no darkness, there was only truth and goodness. And in a world that struggles for both of those things, we thank you that he is a light. And he is a light that is who draws us. He is deeply attractive. So Lord, would you help us to put our hand in his? Would you help us to fully trust him? Would you help us to stop trusting ourselves, or to stop dismissing the darkness that is there in the world and that is there inside of us? Would you help us to be real this Christmas? For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.